I'm Joe Kramer, composer of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to listen to this podcast from the Geekcast Radio Network.
You're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Unleash the geek in you.
Beg your pardon. Forgot to knock.
Hello and welcome to Geekcast Radio. This is episode 96. I am one of your hosts, GCR Mike, and joining me is our new comic concierge, but everyone pretty much knows him as Movie Revolt Dan, because we're here to talk about the 90s movies. Oh boy.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going. Really wish it would stop sometimes. But yeah, we've hit TV, we've hit cartoons, we're now hitting movies for the 90s. So who knows what's going to happen next? I will be teasing the next episode, obviously, at the end of the show. But yeah, 90s movies. Oh boy, when we were young and crazy. And a little background, folks. I am 4 years older than Dan. So 3 or 4 years older than Dan. So the juxtaposition of how we each watched films when we were that age in the 90s, teenage years, almost teenage years, might be a little different, and that's always a good thing. So what do you remember about watching movies in the 90s from like 90 to 99?
I mean, it was definitely a lot different for me, throughout the decade, because I started the decade as 6 and ended up being 16. So that's a pretty, big change of what type of movies you watch. But for me, like when I think about back to the 90s, watching movies during that time period, like the type of movies I tend to think about a lot from my childhood are the different sports movies, kids sports movies that really dominated that decade for much of it. Things of like from The Sandlot to Mighty Ducks to Little Giants. There was just this cavalcade of all these different family-friendly type of movies that were directed towards sports at the time. And I grew up playing sports and stuff like that. So I think shaped my childhood just as much as anything.
Yeah. For me, I was 10 to 19 in the decade, so yay. Yeah, like, I do remember the sports movies like Angels in the Outfield and Little Big League. Was it Little Big League? Yeah, Little Big League is the one where it's Billy that owns a sports team or whatever. The only reason why I remember Little Big League is because he got caught watching Night Nurses from Jersey in the hotel room. It's the only reason why I remember that movie. The 90s also had, obviously, stuff like Basic Instinct and Lethal Weapon and all of that. Obviously, Lethal Weapon 1 was 87, but 92 was Lethal Weapon 3, I think? I don't know. We'll figure that out later. But yeah, for me it was like... And my mom let me pretty much watch whatever. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 7 in 87, so... and back then... There was no instant gratification in the 90s. We weren't there yet. I mean, we just started getting the internet in the late 90s. But, back then you had to wait, you saw a movie in theater, you had to wait at least a good year and a half before it hit VHS. Because DVDs didn't start until like the mid-90s, I think. Somewhere around there.
Yeah. I mean, going to a big part of the 90s for me was going to the video store. There was one that was like we would ride our bikes to, and on the weekend, and they had like, I forget what the deal was. It was like $3 for certain days. Like you went on like Tuesdays in the summer, you got 3 movies for $3, and I got so many things. Like I remember getting a lot of the Ernest movies, and but yeah, like you said, you couldn't just turn on Netflix. You had to go get a VHS and to watch many of your films, and a lot of the stuff I watched, much of it, like I didn't see in theaters. I saw on VHS or when it eventually got on television.
Yeah, there are very few movies I saw in theaters. It was a super special occasion. But going to the theaters in the 90s was wow. Like the early 90s, 90, 91, 92, 93, around there, I wasn't going all that often, obviously. But as I got older, by the time I hit between 14 and 17, I would go to the theater a lot. But those early years, like, I remember seeing Batman Returns in theaters. Sometimes I wish I wouldn't because, God, that movie is horrible. People say Batman Forever and Batman and Robin are bad. I'm sorry, Batman Returns is bad. What else? Going to the theaters in the 90s versus now, you could actually get away with sneaking food in. You didn't have to spend exuberant amounts of money. But there are people that do that. And movie theaters now, oh my God, if anyone in the 90s saw a movie theater now, like basically take the movie theaters now, throw them in the TARDIS or the DeLorean or whatever and send them back in time, people would be like, you can get beer at the movies? You can have dinner at the movies? What crazy futuristic stuff is this?
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly has changed with that technology becoming. They've really had to kind of differently market the way movies are treated. You know, combining a lot of, making it more of an experience, adding in the ability to kind of combine restaurants and movies just to try to bring people in. So, and I think in a lot of ways, yeah, things are more expensive. Though, let's not kid ourselves. When their prices were expensive in '90s, comedians were making jokes about how expensive food was in the movie theaters ever since they existed.
Oh yeah.
But certainly, I think the quality of the theaters have greatly improved. You know, from the seating to just the presentation. Now, of course, it's a lot more expensive, and now we have 3D and everything like that. It certainly is. When you combine all that, it is a lot more. And we don't have. I remember one of the things we went to a lot in the '90s was like the $1.50 theater.
Oh yeah.
And like that was always a lot of fun because it's, you know, you could see legitimately a movie for $1.50. It was like, it just was out of regular theaters, and but you got the like I saw Jurassic Park for the first time in a $1.50 theater. Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, the American classic Waterworld.
What?
Yeah.
Why? You need to turn in your movie revolt card right now. You saw Waterworld in theaters. Why?
I was a kid. You just went to see whatever. You know, that was the thing. You know, we had a mall that was next to a movie theater, and you're a teenager, and there's not a whole lot to do. So you went to the mall, we went to the movie theater, went to the arcade beforehand, and then whatever was, we would try to find something. And Waterworld was supposed to be this really, it was before the internet existed, and it looked kind of cool,
It's funny you mentioned malls and movie theaters being next door to each other, because nowadays, at least for the last 20 years or so, there are movie theaters in malls now. And I remember going to the Green Tree Mall in Clarksville, Indiana at the time, Southern Indiana / Louisville, Kentucky kind of thing. And there was a poster for Kevin Smith's Mallrats. My 14, 15-year-old brain at the time was like, there are rats in the mall. Uh-oh, we better get out of here. Like, I didn't know who Kevin Smith was back in 94, 95, 96. So, obviously Mallrats came out in 95. So, I'm like, oh, God.
Man, I can't believe this shit. Why are we sitting here trying to figure out where we went wrong with our significant others?
I think we just nailed it in your case.
No, there is something out there that can help ease our simultaneous double loss.
Ritual suicide?
No, you idiot, the fucking mall!
One of the saddest the saddest thing I have to admit, and I can't believe I'm going to admit this, I actually saw the remake of Sabrina in theaters. With Harrison Ford and whoever, Julia Ormond and whoever played the brother, I forget off the top of my head. So, yeah. Alright. Anything else on going to the theaters back then you want to talk about or bring up?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Alright. So, I went ahead, folks, and like we did in the TV episode and the cartoon episode, Optimus Solo had gotten things from the 10 years of the movie of the topic, so I went ahead and did that for the movie. So right now I'm going to list off from each year, from 90 to 94, the top 10 grossing films of each year. 1990 at number 10 we had Kindergarten Cop. I love that movie. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes in at number 9, Presumed Innocent at 8, Die Hard 2 at number 7, Back to the Future 3 at number 6, Total Recall at number 5, Dances with Wolves at number 4, Pretty Woman at number 3, Home Alone at number 2, and Ghost at number 1. Wow, we really need to do a podcast comparing top 10 grossing films of the 90s to now, because holy crap, were movie theaters a lot different were releases for movies a lot different back then than they are now.
Yeah, I mean, that's surprising. Like, I forget, I always think Kindergarten Cop was one of those movies that didn't make as much money for Schwarzenegger, but man, I mean, maybe it didn't compare to something like True Lies or something like that, but no.
Yeah.
And Ghost was, I forget how huge a phenomenon Ghost was, but that was gigantic at that time.
Yep. Good old Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg. In 91, we had at number 10 City Slickers, number 9 Hot Shots, number 8 Cape Fear, number 7 The Addams Family, number 6 JFK, number 5 The Silence of the Lambs, number 4 your favorite movie, Hook, number 3, Beauty and the Beast. Number 2, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And number 1, T2, Terminator 2.
Nothing super surprising there. I mean, my favorite. I did like Hook as a kid, an adult.
The only reason why I said it's his favorite movie, folks, is because he wrote something up about it recently in the last couple of years on GCRN, basically lambasting the movie, and I'm like, it's not that bad. It's actually kind of funny. It's right along the lines of Mrs. Doubtfire and that kind of thing, except it's Peter Pan.
I didn't I get it like a 2 out of 5. It's not like I lambasted it. I just said it's just not great. It's not. I did a review of every Steven Spielberg movie up to that point, and I didn't give that a passing grade. It's by far not his worst movie. It's probably not even, but yeah.
And Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was the first time I think I ever saw Christian Slater. What I love is later when, I think it was when Men in Tights came out and Cary Elwes is like, I can actually do an English accent unlike some other Robin Hoods. That was hilarious. Not surprised that JFK is on the list, but I'm surprised that it's so low. And I remember seeing that back then, because I could have sworn one of our high school history teachers basically made us watch it or something after it hit VHS, but I really don't remember that movie, and I'm surprised it's at number 6 and not higher.
I mean, it did lead to one of the best Seinfeld episodes ever. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I honestly, if you asked me if it was JFK a top 10 movie, a top 10 film, grossing wise the year it came out, I probably would have guessed no, but obviously, like you mentioned, it's very different comparing, we're used to franchises and comic book movies.
Yeah.
You don't very often see, like, that was nominated for Best Picture, and we don't tend to see those in the top 10 anymore.
Yeah, no. 1992, the top 10 was Wayne's World at number 10, Bram Stoker's Dracula at 9, Sister Act at number 8, You Can't Handle the Truth at number 7 with A Few Good Men. My least favorite Batman film, Batman Returns at number 6, Lethal Weapon 3 at number 5, Basic Instinct at number 4, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York at number 3, and The Bodyguard at number 2, with Aladdin being number 1. That's not surprising. I mean, like, there were, quite literally, my dad would not take me to see Aladdin because the lines were out the door and around the corner.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't talk about, and I should have mentioned, was like, yeah, obviously the 90s, the thing I think about too is the Disney Renaissance, from Beauty and the Beast to Aladdin, Lion King, which we'll get to. But bringing up The Bodyguard, because a big thing that helped that was the fact that had one of the biggest, that soundtrack was huge as well. So
oh yeah, it was.
That also was, again, something that doesn't happen as much. Soundtracks are not not what they once were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say soundtracks aren't that big of a deal now. They kind of are and they kind of aren't. It just depends on if people are soundtrack enthusiasts. I don't know. That's a discussion for another day, but it's...
Yeah, I mean, like, the point, what I mean by that is that they're, in pop culture, they aren't as impactful when it comes to actually, like, you know, you used to have soundtracks would actually be a part of marketing in the sense of often getting people into the theater, where that's not nearly the case anymore.
No, it really isn't. And I've said this several times on this show and other podcasts we do here at GCRN. I'm a soundtrack score guy. Like, you put John Williams, anything in front of me, and I'm going to love it. You do, let's see, Jerry Goldsmith, Michael Kamen, any of that, and some of the more recent stuff. Pretty much anything Brian Tyler does, as long as I want to see the film, I'm going to want to hear his music for it. Don't care what anyone says. The Iron Man 3 score is amazing.
Yeah, I do like Brian Tyler stuff. A lot of his Marvel stuff is really good.
Yeah, it is. All right, so 1993, the top 10 was, at number 10, The Pelican Brief, which is a John Grisham novel adapted to film. Number 9 was Philadelphia. Number 8 was Sleepless in Seattle. Number 7 was Cliffhanger. Number 6 was Indecent Proposal. Number 5 was another John Grisham novel adapted to film, The Firm, with Tom Cruise. Number 4 is Schindler's List. Number 3 is The Fugitive. Number 2 is Mrs. Doubtfire herself. And number 1, those giant dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. 93 was a weird year. 93 was a really original year if you look at this top 10 grossing films, because no sequels.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I don't know last time. Well, that's happened recently. I mean, it's probably been. It might be 93, actually.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I remember Schindler's List is another one they used in school for us once it got released to VHS. Out of all the John Grisham novels that have been adapted that I've seen, between The Pelican Brief and The Firm, I like The Firm better because I like the book better. Sleepless in Seattle, I just saw that about 3 years ago. I had never seen it. Never had any interest or anything like that. Everybody knows Indecent Proposal, $1 million to sleep with your wife. It's general. I know you know, but clarifying for people here. 94, top 10 was at number 10, Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford. Number 9 was Interview with the Vampire. Number 8 was 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Number 7 was Dumb and Dumber. That should have never had a sequel. Number 6, this is shocking, The Flintstones with John Goodman as Fred Flintstone.
You forget how huge that movie was.
It was super huge!
Yeah. It was the backstory of that movie is kind of interesting. How it was in development forever, and eventually someone it was supposed to be dark at one point. It was just almost a lot different than it was. But yeah, people forget that it was one of the biggest movies of that given year, and it gave us, of course, the McRib. Was because of the Flintstones. Yep,
exactly. And the McRib rears its ugly head every few years, just like the Szechuan sauce. Number 5 was Speed. Oh, God, that damn bus. Number 4 was Jim Carrey in The Mask. Number 3 was True Lies. So can you guess what beat out True Lies?
What's 94?
Uh-huh.
Or 95?
94.
Was it The Lion King?
That is number 1, but number 2, Life is Like a Box of Chocolates.
Forrest, yeah.
Number 2 was Forrest Gump. Obviously, number 1 was The Lion King. Once again, I don't know why. This was purely just a day off of school. We were at school, but they were giving us some sort of recreation time. This had to have been 95, 96 at this point when I'm saying this. I did not see Lion King in theaters. I wanted to, but I didn't. I saw it at school for some odd reason. I don't know why.
Interesting. The Lion King was the very first movie I saw in theaters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was I came, you mentioned, your family let you watch anything. My family was the opposite. My parents were really controlling over what I was allowed to watch for much of it. so I didn't go to the theaters very often, especially with my actual family. When I was older and I could go by myself, I went much more, which I think is why I went so often when I was older, because it was like, now I can go. But yeah, it was the very first movie I saw in theaters was The Lion King.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed Speed. I enjoy Speed now more than I did back then, mainly because it's Dennis Hopper versus Keanu Reeves. It's like The Matrix before The Matrix was The Matrix. True Lies, I actually hate that movie.
Really?
The ending is the best part, not because it ended, but because he's in the jet and all of that and whatever, or the daughter's in the jet and he's hanging off the jet. But most of that movie, I felt that Arnold and Jamie Lee Curtis had zero chemistry.
I mean, they're kind of supposed to not like each other for the majority.
That's true. All right, so those are the first 5 years of the 90s. We're going to now talk about two more topics. First up is 90s movie trends. What movie trends in the 90s can you think of off the top of your head?
Well, we talked about a couple of them already, with sports films and the animation, and that the animation was really big, and we saw like in the sense of like a lot of people try to copy the success of Disney, and some other companies attempted but didn't have it. But also the trend began with computer animation, with Toy Story coming out, and I think another trend that was really big was like extreme sports at the time. There would be like films for some reason where suddenly there's a rolling blading sequence. Thinking of Mighty Ducks, for example, like the starting of Mighty Ducks 2 is there's just rollerblading. That was really huge. Comedies also, in the sense of like there were a lot of slapstick comedies after Jim Carrey became big, and Pet Detective was huge, even though it wasn't like the top grossing movie of the year. It was certainly very popular, and that I think led to a lot of copycats of people trying to. The Farrelly Brothers, I think, broke out, and we kind of got more comedies along that line once again, more PG-13 rather than a lot of the R-rated comedies that were existing in the 90s or 80s.
80s, yeah. That's the biggest transition I noticed in movies from the 80s to the 90s. Everything went... As soon as PG-13 was in existence, they all aimed like very... And I mentioned this to Steve Megatron the other day on one of the records. I said something about... Nowadays, you don't really see rated R trailers. Like, unless it's specifically a horror film, like, the only rated R movie that I know that's in pop and or geek or any kind of culture right now is Deadpool 1 and 2. Like, it shocked me, like, 3 or 4 years ago when I went back and I realized that RoboCop from 87 was rated R. I forgot that movie was rated R.
It was so violent.
I know! That's the thing! And that's the thing about the 90s is the transition from the 80s into the 90s, like you said, there are look at all these lists I just listed off. There are plenty of action films in the early 90s, but as you said, most of it's going towards the comedy angle. I don't like later where the comedy angle goes because I blame the 90s for all the grotesque, stupid comedies that they have now for the last 10, 15 years. Because once they did the whole, like something like There's Something About Mary or whatever, not just that one, or Dumb and Dumber or whatever, it doesn't matter. I feel since those movies have been released 20 years ago, people from 2000 to now pretty much try to amp up the vulgar factor on comedies. Like, what's the grossest joke we can do and still make people laugh? And that's just... I don't mind slapstick. I grew up with the Three Stooges. Slapstick is amazing, but today's comedy films are just not my thing. I would much rather watch The Mask right now than watch whatever current comedy is out.
I don't know. I think the best comedies right now is typically, obviously, in TV, but
yeah,
we do get some good comedies here and there. I don't know if I feel like we get. I think it's the opposite, really, where most of the comedy is dialed back, and we don't get a lot of R-rated comedy because people are too scared to have R-rated comedy. Because once you make something R-rated, you're limiting who can go see it, so everything kind of gets put in that PG-13 area, and you're stuck with things that are just like trying to be edgy but are a little bit pigeonholed in their mold. And I mean, gross out comedies have been around forever. I think really kind of what started it was probably in like the 70s with like Animal House, and 80s had a lot of them as well. Certainly the 90s, like it upped the ante, and something like Hangover came in recently, and then thinking of last year, Girls Trip was like one of the biggest R-rated comedies, and that certainly had it was like the woman version of the R-rated comedy, and had some gross out moments. But I think, if anything, what we saw after the 90s, early 2000s were a lot of just like things in the middle of PG-13. Though we did get some, I see that with like at the end of the 90s, we got like American Pie, and then that led to
way too many sequels.
R-rated. Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like it either goes one way or another. Either it's too far or not far enough.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I mean, there's some good stuff out there. But of course, it's none of it's coming to me right now.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about 90s air quotes good and air quotes bad movies. Like, I will admit to several things that I loved watching in the 90s, but I know it's just because I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it's, a great movie overall by any means, but most people would consider half the stuff that I'm going to talk about here bad movies. You mentioned rollerblading earlier. My first thought was to 1993's Airborne with Shane McDermott, Brittany Powell, Chris Conrad. Basically about Seth Green is in that. It's probably the first film I ever saw Seth Green in.
Jack Black, too.
Yeah, Jack Black. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I absolutely love that movie. As bad as it was, Surf Ninjas. It had Keno in it from Turtles. It had Ernie Reyes Jr. in it, so there's that. But it's like nowadays you mention any movie from the 90s, doesn't matter if it's a comedy, action, whatever, and people would be like, "How come you like that?" Like earlier, I had mentioned that Die Hard 2 was in the top 10 list for one of the years here. And I know people are going to be like, Die Hard 2 actually made money? We hate that movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that was back then when... I don't know what the overall temperature of it was at the time, if it was considered a flop. I don't hate Die Hard 2, but I think it has moments for sure. It's not nearly as good as the original, but...
Obviously, yeah.
But, like, I think, again, that was in time and place when you became a movie star, that you were automatically bankable for the most part. Like if you were Bruce Willis, you knew it, at the lowest amount it's going to make this. If you were Tom Cruise or Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that started the sway a little bit. Bruce Willis did some movies that didn't work as well. I mentioned Waterworld, and people thought that would be a huge hit, and that flopped. But yeah, there was a time and place where I think a lot of the time, instead of it being attached to a franchise in the 90s and prior, the big thing was whatever names are attached really were the things that were driving what people want to go see.
Well, that's because the culture back then was whoever the top billed stars were, that you went to go see them because you liked them in whatever other movie you saw them before in. Or like, from Ace Ventura to The Mask. Okay, you saw Jim Carrey as a pet detective who was a bumbling idiot half the time. Of course you're going to want to go see him as this alternate dimension demon kind of thing in a green mask that, can basically eat bullets and whatever. The Mask was the first time I'd ever seen Cameron Diaz in a movie. Because she was in that as Tina.
Yeah. I think that's really what broke her out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And good and bad movies, it's all perspective, folks. Like, nobody's going to take away your geek cred, well, some people might, just because you like a certain... Like, okay, we all know National Lampoon. We all know Vacation, Christmas Vacation, European Vacation, to a lesser extent Vegas Vacation, and then the reboot that they did. National Lampoon had done other things. As a teenager back then, I really dug National Lampoon's Senior Trip. I thought that was hilarious. To this day, it's probably the only Tom Green movie I can actually watch with him in it all the way through the film. Because Charlie's Angels doesn't count. You know, the Chad was only in there for like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so folks, what are some good and bad movies in the 90s that you remember? Why don't you listen to the rest of the episode, sound off, and let us know in the comments. Now we're going to get to the top grossing films of 1995 to 1999. This is going to be a crazy 5 years. 95, the top 10 was Jumanji at number 10. Hey, they just released a reboot of that recently. Waterworld at number 9. Why? Casper at number 8. This is... I did not do this. I grabbed this information from a website that shall not be named. Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman. When I say those two names, what movie comes to mind in the 90s?
In the 90s, it would be... why am I forgetting the name? It's in the box. I can't think of the name.
The head's in the box. That's right.
Yeah.
7. The movie 7 is at number 7 top grossing films of 90. Like, really? Come on. That's a little on the nose. Batman Forever at number 6. Pocahontas at number 5. GoldenEye at number 4. I love GoldenEye. That is one Bond film I can watch on repeat all the time. I just love that movie. Apollo 13 at number 3. Die Hard with a Vengeance at number 2. Number 1 movie in 1995. To Infinity and Beyond. Toy Story.
Yeah, obviously not surprised that Toy Story was number 1. Again, outside of Die Hard, not a lot of sequels. It's surprising Waterworld was that high, because you think back to it, you think all the talk was about how that was a huge bomb, and I don't think we would consider any movie currently, and it maybe for the most part like a gigantic bomb if you're in the top 6. But of course, it probably didn't make nearly as much money as the budget was at the time. But it's funny because you look at the budget of that movie compared to it's microscopic compared to that of the Avengers now. So.
Yeah, exactly. There were not a lot of $1 billion movies in 95. 96, this is an interesting list to my mind. Number 10 is Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Caan in Eraser, with Vanessa L. Williams in there as well. Yeah, I'm surprised Eraser got a top 10 all-time grossing listing. Jerry Maguire at number 9. Human head weighs 8 pounds, Jerry. The Nutty Professor at number 8. Ransom at number 7. 101 Dalmatians, the live-action version, at number 6. I mean, I really don't think I need to clarify that, because obviously the animated version came out way long before this, but...
Hey, it gets released,
Yeah, some people may not know. Number 5, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Number 4, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, The Rock. Number 3, Mission Impossible, everybody's favorite IMF agent Ethan Hunt in his first adventure for Mission Impossible franchise. That is one franchise I absolutely love.
You made it sound as if I was recruiting her for her skills as a thief.
Well, then I misled you, or you made the wrong assumption. Either way, we are asking her to resume a prior relationship, not do anything she hasn't already done. Voluntarily, I might add.
No. She's got no training for this kind of thing.
But to go to bed with a man and lie to him, she's a woman. She's got all the training she needs.
I don't think I can get her to do it.
You mean it'll be difficult?
Very.
Well, this is not mission difficult, Mr. Hunt. It's mission impossible. Difficult should be a walk in the park for you.
Join the IMF. See the world on a monitor. in a closet.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for Fallout. Oh, God. Number 2, Twister. And number 1, Will Smith. Oh, God, I just blanked on his name. Jeff Goldblum. Bill Pullman and everybody else. You know, this is your Independence Day. That was huge that year. Like, I know it's Will Smith. I know it's this. I know it's that. But that movie, it was freaky when that movie came out.
I mean, it was a movie that made Will Smith into Will Smith. Before that, he wasn't the biggable star, and then that kind of led. That was a big part of why he became, the biggest movie star for much of the '90s and early 2000s.
Exactly. Yeah. The thing about Independence Day is the reason why I say that movie is freaky is because I believe it released on either July 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. I forget. It was basically July 4th weekend. I'm not looking it up online to see what the actual release date was, but basically it released that weekend. Movie opens with July 2nd, July 3rd, I'm like, damn. I love Independence Day. Eraser's kind of a guilty pleasure. I don't watch it all that often. I've seen it a couple of times over the years. Jerry Maguire, who doesn't, quote Jerry Maguire every so often, Everybody going into their boss for a raise. Show me the money! I mean, how do you not say that? Well, you probably don't want to get fired, but still. I'm surprised The Hunchback of Notre Dame is in here, because that's an animated thing from Disney, I believe. This is the shift. We mentioned earlier how the Disney Renaissance was kicking back up. 96 to the early to mid 2000s, Disney kind of lost me. I think after Pocahontas, I was done watching Disney stuff until later.
Yeah. I mean, I still think, Hunchback is one I think is a little underrated, but yeah, it certainly, was not hitting the same heights of, Lion King is where it basically peaked, and then it slowly, maybe not slowly, but, Pocahontas wasn't as good. Hunchback, I think, is still good, but not nearly to that level, and then I think that Renaissance started to slowly kind of wither away, and as Pixar and in CGI animation started taking over.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, in 1997. 97's an interesting year. The Full Monty at number 10. The Fifth Element at number 9, which I'm really surprised that made top grossing. My Best Friend's Wedding at number 8. Liar Liar at number 7. As Good as It Gets at number 6. Air Force One at number 5. Tomorrow Never Dies at number 4, which is the second of the Brosnan Bond films. Men in Black at number 3, so another year for Will Smith. The Lost World Jurassic Park at number 2. And of course, sadly, because we just can't keep them frozen, our hearts will go on with Titanic as number 1. I hate that movie.
Really?
I don't hate it. I hate the situation I was in at the time for that movie because, young love and blah, 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 and you're willing to do a grand gesture. And a grand gesture at 17 and 97 for me was basically sitting in a theater for 3 hours for this girl that I liked. And that didn't go anywhere because apparently I wasn't super heavy into religion at the time. So it wasn't going to work because of that. Whatever.
Hey, it all worked out for the best, though.
Yeah, obviously. I'm here now. But, yeah, no, that... I can go back every once in a while and watch that movie. I think the coolest Titanic reference in 21 years was Victor Garber on Legends of Tomorrow. Right before he left, there was an episode where they were going to go back to look at the Titanic, and he goes, "Absolutely not. I will not set one foot on that ship. It was built so horribly." Because he played Jack Andrews, the person who built the ship in the movie. That was super hilarious. But yeah, 97, interesting year for top 10 grossing. I don't remember the last time I saw As Good as It Gets. I remember what the movie is, but that's a movie that I just don't remember. Glenn Close going from Cruella de Vil to the First Lady in Air Force One. There's that. Men in Black, I liked it. I don't know how much I enjoy it now anymore. Because that was the early Will Smith slapstick comedy type of film.
Yeah, I still like Men in Black. I have not watched it in some time, but I remember even liking Men in Black 3 more than I thought I would. But it is a weird movie that it was as popular as it was, and again, I think it had a lot to do with the popularity of Will Smith. But it certainly has certain elements of pop culture that have permeated pop culture since then. The minor race tool that often comes up in different conversations. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's I'd be interested in revisiting that movie because I have not seen it in some time.
Yeah. 98 was Lethal Weapon 4 at number 10, Shakespeare in Love at number 9, number 8 was Dr. Dolittle, number 7 was Mulan, number 6 was Deep Impact, number 5 was A Bug's Life, number 4 was There's Something About Mary, number 3 was Godzilla, number 2 Saving Private Ryan, and number 1 Armageddon.
Yeah, Armageddon. Man.
Oh, Michael Bay. Back before you were ruining giant robot movies.
Yeah. It's just looking at the comparison of seeing how movies evolve. Think about it. We started in 90 with Ghost, which is this romantic, heavy romance, supernatural film, and then we had Titanic. But it seems to be back and forth with the gigantic Jurassic Park to now, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think quality-wise, Jurassic Park much better.
Oh yeah, Jurassic Park is much better. It's just, I don't know. I think for me, I think, like I said, I saw Jurassic Park, and that's pretty much the only one I've seen because by that point I was kind of losing my young little kid brain of really loving dinosaurs. I was moving on to other things, and after that movie I was like, okay, what's next, kind of a thing. I'm surprised that Eddie Murphy has 2 movies here. I'm surprised and not surprised, but I'm surprised one of them is a comedy, which he's known for anyway, but I'm also surprised that the other one is an animation one, because Mulan, he was Mushu, the dragon, in that. I've never seen Deep Impact. I think that's the one with Morgan Freeman and a bunch of other people, something about a quake or something, because that year... Asteroid, okay. Well, that's right. That's what I remember about 98. You had Armageddon versus Deep Impact, because they were both asteroid world-destroying films.
Yeah, it was a case of I've actually not seen Deep Impact to this day either. I have seen Armageddon many times.
Yeah, I love that movie. I don't care what anyone says. I love Armageddon. It's one of the best 90s action films, of the late 90s anyway. 1999, once again, interesting year. Starts of some things, ending of other things, or not really ending, but kind of putting on hiatus kind of thing. Number 10 is something I have never seen, nor do I ever care to see. The Blair Witch Project. Number 9, American Beauty. Number 8, may you rest in peace, Q, The World Is Not Enough, the third Brosnan Bond film, the last film for Desmond Llewellyn as Q.
You're not retiring anytime soon, are you?
Now pay attention, 007. I've always tried to teach you 2 things. First, never let them see you bleed.
And the second?
Always have an escape plan.
That was rough. I mean, I know the guy passed away and all that, but watching that movie and realizing that that's his last one, that's a little rough. Number 7, Notting Hill. Number 6, The Mummy. Number 5, Tarzan. Number 4, The Matrix. Number 3, Toy Story 2. Number 2, The Sixth Sense. We see dead people. Number 1, it's all about the midichlorians, because Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, man.
This is embarrassing to say, but that was the first Star Wars film I saw in theaters.
Well, I mean, the other ones came out, like, what, 84 was the release of...
It was 83 for Jedi, 77 for... It was 77, 80, and 83.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was born the year after.
Yeah.
I did see the New Hope. I did see the relaunch, or New Hope in theaters, but what's when they did the... You know, they had for a limited time, they brought back A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in theaters once they did the special edition. So I've never seen the originals in theaters. But but weirdly enough, I never saw Phantom Menace in theater. I don't know why. I just never went when it came out that year. So
I did. It was okay. I mean, at the time, the experience of going to see it. The action on screen was great, obviously, that kind of stuff. Star Wars, The Phantom Menace on its own. We have we have 2 episodes, folks, of Movie We Can Review, where in total we spent 5 hours on the all 6 Star Wars films. Just go back and listen to those episodes if you want my thoughts on the prequels. But yeah, 99, another interesting year. Tarzan was huge that year. Like, I know I said earlier that Disney was kind of on a decline thing, but I mean, one of the biggest reasons, 2 big reasons why Tarzan was huge. Number 1, Phil Collins.
Yeah, the song that beat Blame Canada for the Oscar.
Yep. Number 2, Tony Hawk, pro skater. The reason why I say this is because the behind the scenes for Tarzan is that they had Tony Hawk come in, and that's when Tarzan does his animated tree, sliding through the trees thing. It's Tony Hawk doing his skating moves. I remember that as a behind-the-scenes thing for that film. The Matrix freaked me out. Even though I was 19 years old, I've never been one for, giant baby farms in a futuristic dystopian world.
I love The Matrix.
I love The Matrix in principle. Yes, I love the movie itself, but that one scene just creeped me out. The rest of it is fine.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the 10 years of the 90s top grossing films. We got 2 more topics here, then we're going to get the heck out of here. Films we love rewatching from the 90s. What are some movies that you go back and you can rewatch that you absolutely love watching?
The Sandlot is number 1. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I watch it a lot. Back when it used to be on like ABC Family a bunch, but it's one that it's like I get the itch every now and then, and I might throw it in. Jurassic Park, of course, one of my favorite films of all time as well. Even if it's just like picking out certain scenes to rewatch it over and over again. And now that I have a kid as well, revisiting a lot of the classic Disney movies of the time. Aladdin is probably number 1 on that list, and along with Toy Story and Lion King as well. And then one of my favorite films of the 90s, Goodfellas, is fantastic. And one thing I didn't talk about in Trench, which I should have, was in the 90s, it was also the breakout of a lot of the new independent scene, which was spearheaded by Kevin Smith, who we brought up with Clerks, and of course Quentin Tarantino, and Pulp Fiction again is another movie from the 90s that I tend to watch. If they're looking at the films I've rewatched the most, that's up there as well.
Yeah, it's so funny that I was in GameStop the other day, and recently I have not necessarily become obsessed, but I've become a Funko Pop collector. And they had 3 characters from Super Troopers that are now Funko Pops. They had Mac, Farva, and Ramathorn. later this month, on the 28th of May, they're releasing the Sandlot Funko Pops. The Beast is getting his own Funko Pop with the baseball in his mouth. It's amazing. I know they're just these little things, but it's just so super cool. Yeah, I love the Sandlot. The Sandlot is one of those... The Sandlot, the Mighty Ducks... Honestly, I know people are going to lambaste me for this, but honestly, all three of the Mighty Ducks films, obviously the first is the best, but I love that entire trilogy of films, because there have been hockey films before that and since then, but those were really some of the best ones.
Yeah. I Mighty Ducks 2 still remains my favorite out of the two. Out of the three, I should say.
Yeah. But the Sandlot, I mean, you can't go wrong with that movie. And what I'm surprised to see on this grossing list, what I'm surprised that isn't here, A League of Their Own. Like, I'm really surprised that didn't get... I know that's not a kid's baseball film, but... that was pretty huge. I mean, you had Tom Hanks, you had Rosie O'Donnell, you had Madonna, you had Gina Davis, you had, Gary Marshall. You had all these people in that movie that basically gives a sort of history of, women in baseball during the war. I'm really surprised that didn't hit the top grossing list for the year it came out in 92.
Yeah. I'm sure it's probably within the top 20 or something like that.
Probably, yeah. Other movies from the 90s I like rewatching, like I mentioned, pretty much the 3 Bond films that came out. I just love watching Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. That may or may not be blasphemous because, like you said earlier with the Star Wars stuff, we had to actually watch them on VHS or whatever. So with the Bond movies, yeah, Timothy Dalton was the Bond when I was a kid in the late 80s, but, I think I remember seeing License to Kill once, and okay, sure. Timothy Dalton to me is not James Bond. He's Neville Sinclair from The Rocketeer. I mean, it's just the way he is. It's just the way I think of him. And, I had watched Remington Steele as a kid with my grandmother, so seeing basically Pierce Brosnan come back and do Bond, I just absolutely love that. I'm sure there are other ones that I do enjoy rewatching. Okay, sad one. I don't watch it. It's sad on my own part, not necessarily a sad movie, but I don't watch it all that often, but I used to rewatch Basketball every couple of years.
I didn't watch it. I watched that a lot as a kid because it was always on Stars or something like that.
Yep.
So I would find myself watching. I've not, But you're not alone. I did rewatch that movie more than I probably ever should have.
Yep, probably. Okay, so last question, last topic. Does the decade of film the 90s gave us still hold up? Not talking about movies individually, but the decade on a whole. The movies that came out in these 10 years, most of them. Not just the top grossing ones, but all of them. Do the trends, do the this, do the that, does all of it still hold up? What do you think?
I mean, certain aspects don't. I mean, like I mentioned, if it's like I'm watching The Avengers and suddenly I see Captain America rollerblading down the street, like that's, or doing something of that nature. Certainly not. I think a lot of the filmmaking techniques, a lot of the things that were spearheaded. I think a big change we saw was how the way dialogue was handled in films drastically adjusted because of things like Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith, where you had characters that would spend a lot of time just conversing about things of the now or fandom in general, and I think that does hold up. If anything, it's so common now that it just seems when you go back and watch it, especially if you weren't aware of the movie at the time, it just seems normal. But it was something that was brand new. But there, I mean, I think looking at the best films of that period in time, Jurassic Park and special effects, well documented, still hold up pretty well. I think still set the standard, especially anything that was animatronic. But there are certain things that maybe don't. Early CGI, in certain cases, even like Terminator 2, which was groundbreaking at the time, some of those sequences don't look as good today. But as a whole, I think there are more things that do than don't.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, the 90s as a whole for films in the decade, I think, does hold up. Because you have a lot of hidden gems that people may or may not remember. Not that I really care about this, but because outside of A Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket, I'm not really a Kubrick fan, but like Eyes Wide Shut was huge in '99. Like I said before, the Mission Impossible film that launched that franchise. Like you said, all the sports films and things like that. The transition from more action to comedy was still interesting, and we still have more of a mix now. I know, yes, nowadays it's kind of oversaturated with superhero films and things like that, but I think at some point we're gonna just basically go back and compare like 1990 to 2010 or something, and just look at at each of those years' films and see how different they were, and just talk about the differences from decade to decade. 90s movies are just, at this point in time, they're pure guilty pleasure. Back then it was super exciting to have, like, Eraser or True Lies, or even though I don't really care for that movie, True Lies, but those action films that did come out, Mission Impossible, the comedies with Ace Ventura and The Mask, and There's Something About Mary, and things like that, Dumb and Dumber. It's not all bad. Like, I get it, there are plenty of bad 90s movies, there are plenty of bad 80s and 70s movies as well. And there's plenty of bad movies today, but it's not all bad. And like I said earlier, it basically just comes down to perspective and what you like, I guess. I don't know.
Yep.
All right. Where can the people find you online, sir? What do you got going on? All kinds of stuff. You just launched a new show on the network, Comic Concierge, so if you want to break all that down for us.
Yeah, so have Comic Concierge on geekcastradio.com, and what I do on that is I usually do 2 episodes a week, where one I run through the week that was in comics, and then another I bring someone on that's not typically a fan of comics and recommend a book to them based upon their other likes and things like movies, TVs, and books, and we talk about it. Not sure when this is going up, but one of the recent episodes I spoke with Jason Michael of the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast about the comic Lady Killer from Dark Horse. Spoken with regarding a variety of different comics of Fade Out, Gotham Central with DJ Valentine, who's been a common guest on many Geekcast radio episodes, but you can find that at geekcastradio.com. And also Cinema Geeks, which we're just doing a variety of different things.
Awesome. Where do the people find you online, Twitter or any of that kind of stuff?
I'm on Twitter at Movie Revolts.
All right. I am at TFC and Mike. You can follow at Geekcast Radio on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff for all your network updates. As Dan said, visit the website, geekcastradio.com. We've got a lot coming up. We've got some changes. We've got a whole brand new website we're working on. And next episode, we're going to have a super special episode, because for the last almost 9-10 years, Optimus Solo has been blowing his brains out with the math of how many episodes and how many hosts and how many this and how many that. And we're going to be doing the history of the GCRN next time you hear us on Geekcast Radio, not counting any Mayhem Mike's episodes that may come before this one. But the next big thing for GCRN is our history. Optimus Solo is going to take us back in time with the DeLorean over the last 9.5-10 years, and we're going to talk about all things Geekcast Radio Network, because we very rarely often do that. So it's going to be huge, it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be interesting for you guys to hear just how far we've come in nearly a decade of GCRN. Unleash the geek in you, and we will catch you next time.
So, what do we do now? What's the plan? You do have a plan, don't you?
We're working on it. Contingency plans for something like this don't exist. The situation's never been contemplated.
Well, you better start contemplating, because this is a situation that needs to get unfucked right now!
Joe Kramer here, composer from Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. This podcast from the Geekcast Radio Network will self-destruct in 5 seconds.